About twice a year, I get the sudden urge to become a Pokemon diehard for about a month or two, maybe. This is because either a new game might be coming out, like they do every year, or because I start to binge some of my favourite Pokemon YouTubers from when I was like 13 in secondary school, just because of the nostalgia it gives me. And about 2 months ago, this happened again. It all started like it usually does. I started to binge Pokemon videos again on YouTube, buy merch, and partake in one of my favourite childhood pastimes of shiny hunting. I already know by mentioning that last part I've pissed quite a few people off just because they do not have the patience to go through 20,000 encounters for a gold bird when it's usually brown. Which, to be fair, is quite understandable. Anyway, this painful hobby led me to deciding that I actually wanted to do something I've never done before. I wanted to shiny hunt a starter Pokemon, and I don't just mean by breeding. I mean by soft resetting at the start of a game. Now, if you've ever even attempted this with a legendary Pokemon or another starter Pokemon, you will know how painful this is and how much time you have to invest just to get a shiny Pokemon. And sometimes they don't even really change. But anyway, that's beside the point. I needed to find the correct game that I wanted to shiny hunt in. Instantly, Generation 8 and 9 are gone off the list. This is because for some bizarre reason, Game Freak decided to shiny lock the starter Pokemon, which in itself is its own rant, so we're just going to skip over that now, but either way, Generation 8 and 9 are gone. We cannot do those generations. Additionally, Generation 1 is also gone. Shinies didn't exist in Generation 1, so it's basically impossible. Generation 6 and 7, I didn't want to do either, because they are full of painfully long cutscenes. If you have never played Generation 7, start it up, and you will just see what I mean from the very start. The start cutscene has to be at least 10 minutes long. It is that bad, and you cannot skip any of them. And whilst Generation 6 overall isn't as bad as Gen 7 with cutscenes, the cutscene between you picking your starter and being able to see whether or not it's shiny is about 4 minutes long in length, and this has actually led to some of the most patient shiny hunters in the world giving up on this challenge. And as such, I had to either pick a Gen 3, Gen 4 or Gen 5 game, as I really didn't want to play Gen 2. If you didn't already know, unlike post-Gen 6, the shiny odds pre-Gen 6 were not 1 out of 4,096. No, instead they were double that at 1 in 8,192. Meaning that this hunt was going to be double as hard as if I just picked a Gen 6 and onwards game. And as a result, I came to the conclusion of either playing Heart Gold and Soul Silver or Black and White, due to mainly two reasons. One, I had played all the other games in these generations recently, except for these two, and Black and White 2, but you have to play Black and White before Black and White 2. And two, because Heart Gold and Soul Silver in particular is the fastest game to check if your starter is shiny or not, as you can just see in the main menu when you pick your starter. And although this second reason would be extremely helpful for me in the long run, Heart Gold and Soul Silver have to be tied with Black and White 2 for being the most expensive games to find in store or online in the entire Pokemon franchise. Like, are you fucking kidding me? And whilst I do love Pokemon, I am not insane enough to spend £150 on a copy of a game I can get for, totally legal methods. But because of this, I picked to play Black and White instead. As a kid, this was the only generation I had never played, and up until recently, I hadn't even played Black and White 2. As a kid, I loathed this generation, all because of the anime on it. I grew up watching the Gen 5 anime and the Gen 4 anime, just to give you a perspective on my age. And even now, as an adult, I can totally agree with my child self, this is awful. But due to my hatred of this piece of shit, I never wanted to play the Black and White games, along with the fact I found 90% of the Unova decks that I had seen from the anime as being awful, ugly pieces of shit. So, I skipped Gen 5, and also Gen 6, but I came back to play that like 2 years later. However, around 7 years later, I decided to play Pokemon Black for the first time, and I just remember actually really enjoying it. And as such, when I was shopping a few months ago, and I had already decided I wanted to play a Pokemon game, I saw Pokemon Black in my local CEX, and I just decided to buy it, even if it was 50 great British pounds. So, I went home and started playing this game in the first time in what has to be, like, 4 years. And well, by playing, I mean pressing the left and right shoulder buttons and start about 4 hours a day for a month or two straight, peak gameplay, until I finally found my beautiful little snake, Nagini. And originally, I was just planning to transfer this up to Generation 9, so I could have it in Scarlet and Violet when it hopefully eventually gets added to its decks. But I just decided to play the whole game again, because of the nostalgia it gave me just shiny hunting for about 2 months straight. And after finishing this second playthrough, I have to honestly say that Generation 5 is by far the best generation of Pokemon, with it topping my favourite of every category, whether it be Pokemon, Evil Team, Mythical, Champion... Okay, maybe not that one, but my point still stands. This was Game Freak's peak. Every other Pokemon generation has a fundamental bad quality that just basically ruins the games, whether it be awful level scaling, an awful Pokedex, being way too easy, or having about 97,000 cutscenes. Generation 5 is the only Pokemon generation that has all of the games that came out in that generation be perfect, with literally no flaws, except maybe the minor issue here or there. And I know this was a long intro, but please just sit back, relax, and let me explain to you why Generation 5 is my favourite, and why I actually believe it to be the best generation of Pokemon that we have to date. Okay, so I'm going to split this video into a few different parts, so just feel free to use the chapters down below if you want to skip to a certain part to hear my thoughts on a certain aspect of Generation 5. And I will say, this video mainly focuses on Black and White 1, as I have played Black and White 2, but I have never really finished it. I will give my thoughts on Black and White 2's story of what I know, but just know I have not finished it, and as such, I will just give my opinions on what I know and try and focus mainly on Black and White, as that is where I even mainly believe the best parts of Gen 5 comes from. So first, I want to talk about the additions that Generation 5 added to the Pokemon franchise, some of which are even in Pokemon now, 4 generations later. And I think the most obvious one that I'm just going to talk about now to get out of the way is the Shiny Charm. The Shiny Charm quadruples your chance of finding a shiny Pokemon in Generation 5 from 1 in 8,192 to 1 in 2,048, with this being even lowered in later generations to 1 in 1,365, giving you just under a 0.1 chance of every Pokemon you encounter, hatch, whatever, of being shiny, as long as it isn't shiny locked. Which, in Scarlet and Violet for example, has basically made it so any 15-minute session you play on a file where you have the Shiny Charm basically guarantees a shiny Pokemon. So yeah, it's OP. Another thing that was introduced were hidden abilities, which single-handedly changed the competitive environment forever. It resulted in some Pokemon that were complete dogshit before becoming sweepers in a lot of people's teams, and gave breeding even more of a purpose, with Pokemon only being able to obtain hidden abilities through breeding, which is just game breaking. And then, to get even better, Gen 5 finally made TMs unbreakable, which, whilst in Scarlet and Violet they have reverted to TMs being breakable, it is still one of the best features that Gen 5 added, in my opinion, as now in Nuzlocke for Gen 5, Gen 6, and Gen 7, and Gen 8, you don't have to worry about teaching your Gyarados Earthquake just for it to still die and you lose that TM forever. And as well as this, one very unappreciated thing added in Gen 5, which was then removed directly in Gen 6, which makes me kinda sad, is seasons, which change the environment the player travels in, making so many beautiful sceneries, and also causes Deerling and Sourcebook to have different forms depending on whatever season it is, which is just so nice. And now, to avoid sounding like a broken record, my last praise for a feature that Gen 5 has added was finally combining the Pokemon and Pokemon Center. Nah, I'm just kidding. That is a cool feature though, but the best feature was making sequel games. Sequel games. Moving on. Alright, so next I want to talk about probably the most controversial take, which is the Pokemon of Unova. I think they are all amazing in their own right, to be fair, with Generation 5 being the Pokemon generation that has added the most Pokemon to date. Which, side note, I just wanted to mention how I find it weird how Gen 6 and Gen 5 are basically the polar opposites of each other, with Gen 6 having the best anime, Gen 5 having the worst anime, Gen 5 having the best games, Gen 6 having the worst games in my opinion, Gen 5 adding the most Pokemon, Gen 6 adding the least Pokemon, and you get it. Anyway, let's resume. Anyway, I mentioned it before, but Zoroark is my favourite Pokemon of all time, and it's never gonna change. Victini is my favourite mythical, and just by their designs, I think you can see why. Keldeo is also my third favourite mythical, and one of my favourite Pokemon anyway, so that just gives it bonus points. And look, I will admit, quite a few of Black and White's Pokemon are maybe not good or even memorable. It has quite a few forgettable Pokemon, but when they are good, they are fucking good. Like, look at these. Ignore that one, but you get it. And now, I want to get to the real treat of Black and White, and Black and White 2, which is their story. I can safely say that the overall story of Black and White and Black and White 2 is the only story Pokemon has ever actually made that they have ever told well, and is by far the best story of any Pokemon game. And I am definitely not alone in thinking this.
Years ago, if they just made Black and White into a movie, it'd be such a good movie.
Yeah.
But they would never, because that's like the most mature Pokemon plot we ever had. And it's about like, is enslaving Pokemon okay, and should we do it?
Yeah.
It's not going to be that. It's
what if they just remade the...
And we think this because it is the only Pokemon story that is not one-dimensional or really boring and just a drag to play. As big famous Welshman CDogVA said in that clip I just showed, Black and White's story could be adapted to a film, and it could genuinely be an actually good film that isn't held back by being made for kids. Because in my opinion, Black and White's story isn't just made for kids. It is actually quite complex, and every Pokemon story up until, and strangely even after this Pokemon generation, goes back to the Pokemon trope of either having a Pokemon lore dumping story, boring mustache twirling plans, or being non-existent. And in my opinion, Black and White is an outlier for this, because it contains the best written character Game Freak and the Pokemon Company have ever created, with that being N, and the best evil team in the whole series with Team Plasma. N is by far the best character Game Freak has ever created in my opinion, because of one simple reason. N and, as a whole, Team Plasma are the only antagonists in the whole of Pokemon, minus Team Star and Team Yell, but they aren't even worth talking about, who aren't villains or just downright evil. And yes, while Team Plasma do turn out to be evil in the end, N himself is not evil in the slightest. He genuinely believes the message that we got told about Team Plasma throughout the story. He genuinely cares about the well-being of Pokemon and wants to see them free. Even going through the effort of summoning either Zekrom or Reshiram, depending on the game you're playing, and defeating the Pokemon champion just to make this come true. And Team Plasma is no exception to good writing either. Both their story and N's story being continued into Black and White 2, where instead of putting up a facade of trying to liberate Pokemon from their cruel owners, literally dressing up as knights in order to symbolize their goal of wanting to liberate and protect the freedom of Pokemon. Like knights in the Middle Ages would do, instead now they dress up as burglar spy type grunts, the ones loyal to Ghetsis that is. In any other generation, I would expect everyone in Team Plasma to turn against N. However, since these games actually had thought put into their stories, there is actually internal conflict in Team Plasma between those loyal to N and those loyal to Ghetsis.
And from an outsider's point of view, you wouldn't expect this either, especially when Black and White came out in 2010 originally, due to the amount of people that absolutely hated these games. They would act like it had just killed their firstborn, only because it had like 3 Pokemon that didn't look nice to them. And even though the hate has died down now, and people are starting to look on these games more fondly, mainly due to nostalgia, I know that there are still people who will refuse to even play this generation just because of Vanillish's existence. Which just sucks, as it just means they miss out on a great story. With one of my favourite scenes in video game history where Ghetsis reveals to N that he was manipulating him the whole time, and N only responds in silence. You will never see anything close to this with any other Pokemon game. Imagine this bitch going up to this guy and telling him she was manipulating him to take down her evil organization, that she could just easily disband herself, but she just can't be asked to. No, that would never happen. N is genuinely the most complex character Game Freak has added, and also my favourite in any Pokemon game due to his arc, design, and just values in general. I genuinely hope he makes a cameo in a future non-Gen 5 game, so that we can be reminded that Game Freak does actually know how to do good character writing. But until then, I guess we're just stuck getting the same predictable stories in Pokemon until hopefully the inevitable Gen 5 remakes in a few years become the modern day Heart Gold and Soul Silver, when they release on the Switch 2 or whatever the next Nintendo console will be called. But then again, look at Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I just genuinely hope Gen 5 does not get that treatment. I just hope with Black and White remakes, and hopefully their sequels remakes, because I don't understand why we would not get them, we get a faithful retelling of its story, and Game Freak actually gives these games the attention they deserve instead of outsourcing its development to a smaller company that made their storage system. Anyway, give me your opinion on Generation 5, or what you think the best Pokemon generation is. Thank you for watching everyone, and I hope you did enjoy. If you did, please feel free to hit that like button, and even maybe subscribe. Maybe check out one of my other videos as well. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a good day. See ya.